Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
I've always considered myself to be a caring head teacher who acts sensitively to support staff mental health. But what I found increasingly difficult was managing the negative impact on staff mental health when resolving issues related to their employment or daily work. Heartfelt Leadership has been developed by Teachwell Toolkit as a handbook to support head teachers to overcome the challenges of school improvement while supporting staff well-being. We know that difficult conversations can quickly turn into conflict if procedures are not fully transparent, understood and followed. Our handbook takes you through step-by-step processes while maintaining mutual respect, avoiding conflict and finding solutions.
At Bloomsbury Education, we're passionate about supporting teachers with high-quality professional development books from leading experts. Whether you're navigating your first crucial years as an early career teacher or a more experienced teacher looking to refresh your practice or take a step up into leadership, our award-winning books are here to help. We publish practical books to support teaching across primary and secondary, from the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design. Visit the Bloomsbury Education website at bloomsbury.com/education to find out more and use code BLOOMTTR24 to save 20% on all education titles. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday Twilight Show. I'm your host, Michelle, and tonight I'm joined by a very esteemed guest, Mrs. Angela Slack. Together, we will discuss whether or not the English grammar should be taught explicitly, especially in secondary schools. Stay tuned, and let's talk it out.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello there, and that is what we're here for. We are here to talk it out. Let me welcome those who've already tuned in. Charlie, one of my avid listeners, and of course, Tom. When I refer to Tom as my boss, I don't think he likes it, but Tom, my boss, is also here, so I've got to be on my best behavior. So this week is very special. I am happy to be on Teachers Talk Radio. I think it is such an amazing platform. Oh, the other Tom is the real boss. Okay, then I must bear that in mind. Yeah, so it's always an honor to be on Teachers Talk Radio, and tonight is especially special because it is my son's 21st birthday. So whoop whoop to you, Pierre. You are now a proper adult. So that's, of course, interesting, and we will see how you get on in your 21st year. Sorry about the buzz just now. If you heard it, that is an alert for all of us to be safe here in Dubai. So everything is well, no panic, people. It's just a little bit of rain that we're expecting, but we're all good. We're in safe hands. So we're here tonight to talk about everything to do with the English grammar, and I know that it's a topic that can be rather controversial, and we love a bit of controversy on this show, so we can talk it out. I've got a special guest tonight, Mrs. Angela Slack, who will be joining us really soon. And we're going to talk about the English grammar and whether or not we should teach it explicitly, especially in secondary schools, or if we should just continue to let it become an add-on as part of a lesson, or are we shortchanging our students by not teaching it explicitly? So these are some of the things we want to explore. We also want to explore whether or not we're biased when it comes to the use of the English language, or if we have these subconscious biases or conscious biases that we use when it comes to the use of the English grammar. Do we discriminate against those who are not so versed in the vernacular? And is that something we need to overcome? So I'm going to introduce my guest in the meantime, who is waiting. And hopefully she will be here very, very soon. But we're going to continue the discussion. So, Mrs. Angela Slack, if I were to sum her up, I would say a very talented, multifaceted young woman, having taught and trained across secondary and further education for over 20 years in Jamaica and the United Kingdom. She developed specialisms in humanities. I think, Tom, you'll be pleased to know that. We've got a humanities specialist, and she's one of your peers, I suppose. So, Angela has developed skills in humanities, expressive arts, communications, curriculum development, instructional design, special educational needs, life skills, literacy intervention, and work based learning. So, a very, very impressive resume. She has written instructional resources across disciplines for the Heart Trust NTA in Kingston, Jamaica, and has developed a curriculum in North Lincolnshire Schools, UK. So, listeners, thanks for joining. We now have, we've got Charlie still with us, and we have somebody else called Hughes, also online with us. And of course, Tom is still here. And Tom, later on, if you stick around, I would love for you to share your opinion as well on the whole matter of grammar. Who should be teaching it? How should we teach it? And your own thoughts about the way we use it today. So, listeners, remember to download the Podbean app, call us, or send us a message. Let's hear your thoughts on whether or not we should police the integrity of the English grammar or let people have the freedom to say things that they like, for example, or say it whichever way they like. For example, it pains my heart to say this, but people say this a lot: you was, or when I was sat. Should we allow people to get away with it? Should we put a stop to it? Painful for me to repeat those phrases, but do share your thoughts while we take a very short break and listen to our sponsors. Do stay tuned.
I've always considered myself to be a caring head teacher who acts sensitively to support staff mental health. But what I found increasingly difficult was managing the negative impact on staff mental health when resolving issues related to their employment or daily work. Heartfelt Leadership has been developed by Teachwell Toolkit as a handbook to support head teachers to overcome the challenges of school improvement while supporting staff well-being. We know that difficult conversations can quickly turn into conflict if procedures are not fully transparent, understood and followed. Our handbook takes you through step-by-step processes while maintaining mutual respect, avoiding conflict and finding solutions.
At Bloomsbury Education, we're passionate about supporting teachers with high-quality professional development books from leading experts. Whether you're navigating your first crucial years as an early career teacher or a more experienced teacher looking to refresh your practice or take a step up into leadership, our award-winning books are here to help. We publish practical books to support teaching across primary and secondary, from the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design. Visit the Bloomsbury Education website at bloomsbury.com/education to find out more and use code BLOOMTTR24 to save 20% on all education titles. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
Thank you so much. So, some things for us as educators to check out as well. Let me pause to welcome Marjorie. Marjorie's back with us. She joined us last time. So good that you've come back, Marjorie. It means that we are doing something right here on Teachers Talk Radio. I believe Angela is able to join us now. I will hear from her shortly. Charlie, thanks for sticking around. And Koshia, welcome. Koshia was also one of my very special guests. and we had a very lively and engaging discussion. So thank you so much. Do stay tuned and share your thoughts. And why do we need to teach it in the first place? Why is it important? So, first of all, what is grammar? And grammar is defined by linguists as the rules of a language governing the phonology, which is the sound system, the lexis, the vocabulary, of course, the syntax, the sentence structure, and other elements. So, all of these things combined create the grammar rules. Now, why do we need such rules? We need it for clarity because grammar rules help ensure that our message is very clear and that it's easily understood. And proper grammar usage clarifies the relationship between words, phrases, clauses in a sentence. So, where do you put your subject? Where do you put your verb? Where do you put the object? So, the rules of grammar helps to clarify that or help to clarify that. It also aids with consistency. So it gives us a framework for consistency in language usage. So when everyone follows the same grammar rules, misunderstandings are obviously minimized and communication becomes more efficient. So that's just one of the other reasons why it's important that we have grammatical rules. Now, it is also said that grammar helps with credibility. And using proper grammar enhances your credibility as a communicator. It demonstrates that you take care in your writing and that you're knowledgeable about language conventions. And believe it or not, and Kosha, I'm sure you'll probably agree with me or anybody else listening, that sometimes we judge people, whether consciously or subconsciously. Sometimes we judge people based on the way they use the English grammar. You know, they open their mouths and the first couple of sentences you start to evaluate and you start to put them in a certain whether class or rank because this one probably not so intelligent, probably not so well read, and whether that's right or wrong, that's up for debate. But the point is we often judge people based on the way they speak, based on the way they use the grammar, based on the way they use the vocabulary. And I'm just going to share a brief example. Recently, I was reading a very academic book, and very academic book. And the first couple of pages, I came across some mistakes, spelling mistakes, and repeated words. And immediately I was thinking, should I continue with this book? But the content was really good and very useful. So I had to overcome that little bias. But I tell you what I did. I emailed the author and I said, fantastic book. However, please refer to these pages and get your editor to make some corrections because you begin to question the credibility of the text you're reading based on how they use the grammar and how they present themselves. Angela, welcome. Welcome. Let's hear your beautiful voice.
Oh, Michelle, thank you so much for your warm welcome. And I'm so sorry that I had technical glitches. I've been actually hearing for a long time, but you weren't able to hear me.
Well, you know what? We're so happy you're here, and I'd just like everybody to know that although Angela resides in the UK at the moment, she's joining us all the way from Kingston, Jamaica. I was going to say sunny, but my mom told me it's raining. So
It's
she,
actually raining and very overcast, so I'm hoping I haven't brought British weather to Jamaica.
you probably have, Angela. I think you should stay away for a bit and let them enjoy the tropical weather that they truly love and enjoy. So we'll hear from Angela shortly and get some of her opinion. I'm just going to continue with some of the reasons why, a couple more of the reasons why we need the grammar. It's also for professionalism as well. And in many professional settings, such as business communications, academic writing, and journalism, adhering to grammar rules is crucial. It reflects professionalism and attention to detail. Now, Tom, I don't know what your role is at school, but I gather at some point you must have had the opportunity or the need to look at applications and CVs and all of that. And I'm sure your decisions often are based on the way it is written, the way the application is written. You know, people tell you that they look at somebody's cover letter and they see all the mistakes, they don't even bother to go any further. So it does impact on all of those things within our existence. And of course, it is used to standardize. The rules contribute to standardizing the language, making it easier for people from all backgrounds to communicate efficiently. So, overall, grammar rules serve as the foundation of effective communication, facilitating clarity, consistency, and understanding across various contexts. So, once again, Angela, welcome. And thank you so much for joining us on Teachers Talk Radio, the best Teachers Talk platform, I must add. I'm really honored to have you on tonight's show, and I look forward to hearing your opinion on whether or not grammar should be taught explicitly, especially in our secondary schools. And I specified secondary schools because in 2014, in the primary curriculum, when they revamped the national curriculum, for the primary setting especially, it was noted that pupils should develop the stamina and skills to write at length with accurate spelling and punctuation. They should be taught the correct use of grammar. So, my first question, Angela, before we even begin the discussion, could you tell us briefly a little bit about your journey so far as an educator?
Well, my journey is certainly not the standard path as you would expect. First of all, I never expected to be an educator. I never had any plans whatsoever. And I ended up being asked by my former history teacher, who was doing her master's at the time, to do a locum tenens to teach um, US history at sixth form. And I had just left university and I was a young mom, and I was a bit taken aback that she thought I could manage. And she said, "You'll do fine." And long story short, that 3 months covering for her ended up being 8 years at my alma mater,
Wow.
where we both met and taught together in the language department. So I was, I don't know, I my whole journey in education was quite an organic one, I'd have to say.
Hmm. Thank you so
So
much. Hmm.
yes.
Keep going, Angela. If you want to add
Right.
more, that's
So
fine.
right. So I joined my alma mater there, and I became sort of what you call the elastic teacher. If there was a need, I seemed to just be stretched in that direction and to cover everything. But it made me take the job seriously enough to go and train properly as a teacher. And because I realized that I had an acumen for helping students access learning. And I enjoyed it immensely. And so I left there to go on to work with the National Agency for Training in Jamaica, where in the curriculum unit, I was retrained as a curriculum specialist and an
Mhm.
instructional developer, and I enjoyed that immensely. Then I left, went, my family migrated, and we went to the UK, and I went back into classroom practice. So I seem to have always just responded to whatever the teaching need was, and whatever the need was, and where my heart felt I could make a difference. I just really, I guess my story is thumbs up for continuous professional development, because by the time I got finished with my career in education, I had gone back to further education. I'd
Yeah.
gone into ESOL and um, helping speakers who aren't first language speakers to pick up the language, then into adult training, and then into special needs training. So it's been quite a ride, and I have to say I enjoyed it immensely because I learned one key thing which my language teacher taught us. She said education, going back to the Latin root educe, is not about pouring into people, it's about pulling out. And so I think what I had, if anything, that was special about me is that I understood that I need to find ways to pull out what was already in students and to help them to hone that into skills.
Thank you so much. Very well explained. And, we can all agree, Angie, we heard the passion there as well. And I'm telling you, once a teacher, always a teacher. That
This is
passion will
true.
always be with
Always
us,
be there, yes.
always be there. And let me just pause because we have some delegates here. We have a delegate online. I have the honor of welcoming Mr. Errol Bean. Oh,
Woo-hoo.
Mr. Bean, welcome. It is, oh, I haven't seen or spoken to you in years. It is so good to have you. And hopefully, we'll hear your opinion as well, all the way from St. Catherine in Jamaica. I'm indeed honored. Thank you so much, Mr. Bean. And I wish we had the platform for you to sing me a tune, but maybe next time. But do share with us and tell us your opinion. So, Angie, you described yourself as an elastic teacher, which is very interesting. I seem to recall you being more of a history teacher, though I don't know why, but I know you also
Yes.
taught in the English
So
department.
my when I went to train to teach properly or
Mhm.
to upskill myself, I did my teacher training in history. And interesting enough, did my thesis in using drama to teach
Mhm.
history. So there again, I was always borrowing from language arts, the creative arts, because I didn't see where learning had to be compartmentalized per se. My philosophy has always been and still remains, whatever it takes to get the message across, do it. You know.
Okay. Yeah. In
So,
a very holistic way.
yeah. So although my main training was in history and I consider myself a historian, I taught speech and drama and communications at sixth form and English language at the
Thank
lower
you.
levels.
So, Angela, if you could try and stay in one position, hope you're not moving around too much. Sometimes we lose you a little bit. Um, but just to link everything back to the question at hand tonight, as a former history teacher, or as you call yourself, elastic teacher, I love that. I'm going to have to take that one on. How important was the use of accurate grammar, in your classroom? How important was that to you?
Well, do you know, it, it's a split decision between being prescriptivist or descriptivist. For me, I'm on the fence
Mhm.
because, as I said, I believe that whatever is necessary to aid the learner, that's the direction I should go in.
Complete that point that she was making. She was saying that she's on the fence, she's between the prescriptivist and the descriptivist. What's important is that the skills are taught and that those
Situational.
skills are honed in the classroom. And that's what's important to her. So as soon as Angie, as soon as you come back, just interrupt
Right.
and
Sorry, I
continue
don't know
that
what is
discussion.
happening here.
In the
It's
meantime, remember to download the Podbean app so you could call in or send your messages. Tell us, how do you feel about the use of the English grammar? Should we be policing it? Should we let people be creative with the language? Should we cringe when people use the incorrect subject and verb agreement? And we're going to go into some more detail later on about some of common the common grammatical mistakes that people make where English teachers go, oh no, not again. So while I wait for Angie to return, remember, Angie, just interrupt when you do come back. The
okay.
English language has
So I'm
been
back.
through a lot of changes and it has evolved over the years. And I'm talking about from Old English to what we know today as modern English. And for each period of its evolution, it's either as a result of conquest or exploration or something like that, where people, the language evolved and changed. So for Old English, which was around 450 to 1150, also known as Anglo-Saxon, this was a period for the very, very early form of English, and it was heavily influenced by the Germanic languages. So this is where, if I showed you an example of it, you would probably struggle to read it. So that was the very early modern English, and then Old English, and then it moved on to Middle English with the Norman Conquest of 1066, and this is where we had the French influence, and then Middle English grammar became more simple and word order was being established. And that then went into early modern English in the 1500s to the 1800s, where we saw the English language being standardized. And this happened as a result of the printing press. And of course, one of my favorite person, William Shakespeare, the bard himself. I had fun with him in lesson today, teaching my year eights how to insult each other using Shakespearean language. So whatever they had on their heart, on their chest, they could get it out today, point at kids, and insulted them using purely Shakespeare's words. So that was fun. So by the time we got to the early modern English, then the grammar became more standardized, and many of the irregularities were gradually smoothed out. It was influenced a lot by the Latin grammar, and I think Angela mentioned that briefly. And then this led to the development of prescriptivist grammar and the prescriptive grammar rules, which tells you the single subject must agree with the singular verb, and the plural subject must agree with the plural verb. But the singular verb has an S at the end, but the singular subject doesn't. And the plural verb does not, no, has the S, yeah, does not have the S at the end, and so on. So I'd have to do a whole lesson on that. So that's where the complication started. And then we now have what we call today modern English. And even that is evolving through various reasons. So previously it was the Industrial Revolution. We know that through colonial expansion, we had the vocabulary being enriched. And some people say we borrowed words from other languages, others say we stole them from other languages, whatever you want to say. The point is that the English language is a mixture of so many other languages based on colonialism, conquest, so called discoveries, you name it. And Charlie said, if someone could explain affect versus effect to me, that would be great. And Charlie, I will explain that after, well, shortly. My students ask me all the time. So affect, I think it's what it does to you. Effect is what you do to something. So the effect you have on something, but the effect is what it does to you, Charlie. Okay? So hopefully that helps. Um, and so we've borrowed, and that's a very good question. And it's, another one people ask is, when do you use the S, for example, in practice, and when do you use the C? So the S is for the action, and the C is for the noun when it becomes the thing. So this program tonight, Tom, is turning out to be a grammar lesson, but we'll see. So we now have the modern English, which is so influenced by other languages. And there are so many words in the English language that we have borrowed or stolen that we claim, and people sometimes do not even recognize those. So we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, I will share some of those words with you. And hopefully, Angela would have refreshed and she is going to join us. So stay tuned. Let's hear from our sponsors again.
I've always considered myself to be a caring head teacher who acts sensitively to support staff mental health. But what I found increasingly difficult was managing the negative impact on staff mental health when resolving issues related to their employment or daily work. Heartfelt Leadership has been developed by Teachwell Toolkit as a handbook to support head teachers to overcome the challenges of school improvement while supporting staff well-being. We know that difficult conversations can quickly turn into conflict if procedures are not fully transparent, understood and followed. Our handbook takes you through step-by-step processes while maintaining mutual respect, avoiding conflict and finding solutions.
At Bloomsbury Education, we're passionate about supporting teachers with high-quality professional development books from leading experts. Whether you're navigating your first crucial years as an early career teacher or a more experienced teacher looking to refresh your practice or take a step up into leadership, our award-winning books are here to help. We publish practical books to support teaching across primary and secondary, from the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design. Visit the Bloomsbury Education website at bloomsbury.com/education to find out more and use code BLOOMTTR24 to save 20% on all education titles. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
Okay, so do check them out, and I'm sure you'll find something of value. Angela, welcome back. You'll be proud of me, Angie, as a history professional as well, to know that I just gave a brief history of the evolution of the English language. I hope I've done it justice,
And listen,
because I also teach A-level language. Haven't taught it in a while, but hopefully, in a nutshell, I summed it up and established that the English language is a mixture of borrowed languages and vocabulary from other languages. If you could just finish off for us, Andrew, where we stopped. I was asking, as a former history teacher, how important was the use of accurate grammar in your classroom?
Yes, so I was saying I straddle the fence between the descriptivist school and the prescriptivist school because I think both are important. You
Hmm.
need the grammar because it's the foundation and it forms the scaffolding of the language. You have to have some framework within which everything is couched, and you must have rules if people are to have access and understanding is to be clear, especially cross culture and also cross borders, regional dialects, and so forth. You'll have such a plethora of expressions that everyone would be confused, like a Tower of Babel. But situation. But if you are so inflexible that you don't pause for a cause and allow those nuanced changes in expression,
Hmm.
the, the colloquialisms, the slangs, and all of these things to come in, then you're going to lose a lot of accuracy in comprehension. And I think that you have to be constantly balancing as you move forward. And so I think my position would be that the grammar must be taught because you must have a framework and an understanding and a reference point. And if you would, I was thinking about this and I thought if you use the road network, an extended metaphor, you must have a spine, a general spine that connects, let's say, the UK, for an example, from Scotland down to Portsmouth and from Liverpool to say Hull. There must be some spine, some framework that that is the backbone of the transportation network. But then you have to get off into all your villages. So you have your A roads, your B roads, and then your little lanes and all of that, and your walk and footpaths. And so I see the language in the same way, in that grammar gives us that general network with rules and regulations. It's the road code that keeps us from having collisions. It keeps us safely as we try to commute and traverse. It gives us an understanding of how to commute and how to allow others to commute, so that you know when to yield and and so forth, because language
Yeah.
is not just written. You also have to listen and speak,
Yes.
so that sort of dynamism must give way to the descriptivist view, I think. So I think it's a matter of balancing both. And there's a quick example that brings me to mind. Mrs. Muriel Riley, my deceased language teacher, I just hold her in such high regard. And
Hmm.
she gave an example. She said to us, well, language is situational. You have to know in which setting what language to use. And so if you were to go into, let's say, your local markets, let's say back in Jamaica, it would be the Coronation Market. That's the biggest market there. And you're dealing with the common folk, the everyday people, the rural sellers, and you ask them to give you a pound of shrimp. Well, they wouldn't know what you're talking about because they would be lost.
Hmm.
Because in their regional dialect, they say shrimps. So you'd have to know to be flexible enough to switch your language there in order to communicate. You go abroad, it's the same thing. The same words, even in English, have different meaning. In the UK,
Yeah.
I had certain slip ups. When I first arrived, I used Jamaicanisms, as I call them
Yes.
now, and I look back and I smile. And the children looked at me blank, and then I realized, oh, it's the same word, but they don't understand it in the way I'm using it. So there has to be a certain amount of flexibility if you're going to give every child or every learner in this context
Hmm.
access, and if the comprehension is going to be complete, because at the end of the day it's all about communication, and what is
Yes.
in the mind of the sender must end up in the mind of the receiver, so that's my
Love that. Love that, Angela. You said a couple of things there that I'm going to pick up on. You mentioned that it's about the context and whether it's the spoken language or the written language. But for either of those, we do need a kind of guide. And I love the analogy of uh, going to your different places and the different villages and going off the different routes, but there has to be a main spine which guides us so that we have clarity and we have consistency. And also the need to code switch. We have to know when we can relax a little bit, whether speaking or local dialect or relaxing the language and not being too formal, thinking about the vocabulary we decide to use depending on the audience. Because as you said, it's all about
I've always considered
communication
myself
and
to
the
be a caring
questioning.
head teacher
Have I
who acts
communicated?
sensitively
I
to
also wanted
support
to pick
staff
up on the
mental
fact
health.
that when you
But what
moved
I
to,
found
you said
increasingly
you moved to the
difficult was
UK,
managing the
or
negative
just
impact
after
on
that, you
staff
had your
mental health
Jamaicanism, so
when
to
resolving
speak, and the
issues
kids were
related to their
a little bit
employment or
baffled.
daily
I
work.
experienced that as well.
Heartfelt
When I would
leadership
say certain
has been
things and
developed
they
by
would go,
Teach Well
pardon?
Toolkit as a handbook to support head
Pardon?
teachers to
And so
overcome the
people believe when
challenges
you
of
move
school
abroad,
improvement
you try
while
to
supporting
adapt
staff
and speak like
well-being.
people. But it just
We know
happens.
that
It
difficult
happens
conversations
subconsciously
can quickly
because
turn
you
into
need to
conflict if
communicate. So I
procedures are not
totally
fully
get that.
transparent,
Before I
understood and
continue, let
followed.
me welcome
Our
Mariana.
handbook takes you
And
through
Tom, listen to
step-by-step
this.
processes
Mariana
while
has tuned
maintaining
in
mutual
all the way
respect,
from Romania.
avoiding conflict and finding
And
solutions.
she's boosting my
At
ego a
Bloomsbury
little bit. She
Education,
said,
we're
I'm glad to
passionate
be
about
able to
supporting
listen to
teachers
Michelle's
with
show.
high-quality
She's an
professional
amazing
development
English
books
teacher
from
I
leading
met in the
experts.
UK.
Whether you're
Thank you
navigating
so
your
much,
first
Mariana.
crucial
You are
years
very
as an early
kind.
career
Thank
teacher,
you
or
so
a
much.
more
Thanks for
experienced
joining.
teacher looking to refresh
And
your practice or take a step
everybody
up
who's
into
still with
leadership,
us, Mr.
our
Dean, thank
award-winning
you so
books are
much.
here
Please
to help.
remember to share
We
your
publish
thoughts
practical books to support teaching across
with us
primary and
on
secondary, from the
grammar
very
and
best
the
in
usage
research-led
of
practice
the
to trusted
English
advice on
grammar.
inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum
Oh,
design.
there are two.
Visit the
Oh, I've
Bloomsbury
got
Education
both.
website
Tom,
at
hey.
bloomsbury.com/education
Welcome, and
to
thank
find
you so
out
much.
more
So
and use
yes, I'm
code
just letting you know that we've got
BLOOMTTR24 to
in
save
Jamaica,
20% on
the
all
UK,
education titles.
and
Bloomsbury
Romania,
Education,
and I might
books for
have some
every step of
here
your
in
teaching
Dubai
journey.
as well. My head teacher said she wanted to tune in, so we will see. So thanks for that. Thanks for that very comprehensive response, Angela. And here's my next question. So there has been a drive to teach grammar explicitly in primary schools to ensure that they become really strong writers and confident writers. Do you think this should be the case across all key stages? Should it just be in the primary phase? Should secondary school teachers continue? What do you think?
Well, I am glad I was born Anglophone to begin with because I think English grammar is most difficult and perhaps the most difficult. I don't know. Someone else from another language can probably challenge that, and I would, you know, I would
Mhm,
stand to be educated on that. But so I think it should be an ongoing thing. Why?
mhm,
Because learning is lifelong. And I don't think you can exhaust a good grammar education in um, the lower school or the middle school or even the tertiary, even at tertiary level, because I tell you, I have taught at all the levels and I have
mhm,
had the distinct privilege of marking papers at all the levels, and I am aghast all the
mhm.
time at how people slip between the cracks, for want of a better expression. And you realize, oh, they just didn't uptake well. Sometimes it has to do with the student teacher relationship because, the research shows that students respond better to some teachers because of their methodology or whatever. And teacher aspiration also drives learning. So if let's say one child or one learner did not get a proper foundation in grammar at primary, then I should hope that they'd be able to pick up in secondary and that remedial help could be given. I'll remember, you'll recall at the school we both taught at in Jamaica, we had instituted a summer school program. Myself and another colleague went to the headmistress about it because there was so much remedial help needed. And so thank goodness that we were able to do that, or else those learners would have gone on and they would have been just functionally or barely functionally literate, as the
Yeah.
case may be. So I think it should be age appropriate how it's taught, because this is one of the reasons why I spearheaded a program in Northeast Lincolnshire in the UK to upskill persons in the workplace who
Mhm,
missed out and that was such an experience, and what a privilege that was. I mean, I taught in every setting possible from A to Z. I
Yeah.
mean, you just picture a workplace setting, I was there. But it just proved that they needed that uptake because they were in professional situations and they weren't able to progress because they weren't able to gain qualifications that was needed to help them with promotion and so forth. And even their own self-esteem was affected by
Yeah.
their lack of grasp. So I think it should be taught, but I will add a disclaimer that it should be taught sensitively to the age group.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So it depends on the context. Mr.
Yes.
Bean said, I'm sorry, I'm not an expert on grammar. I was invited. I'm here to have someone knowledgeable or some of his knowledge reinforced. And he was happily invited by Angela Slack. So thanks for that. Um, oh, of course. Of course. So, yes, Mr. Bean, we look forward to hearing more. And yeah, we will connect you after the show. We will connect, of course. Now, Angie, I asked the same question to some colleagues, and Kosho is also online, is reminding us of some of the pronunciations that the children in the UK still correct from those of us who are from Jamaica. And she said blue. So I don't know how they hear it, Kosha, but when she says blue or harvester, I know our language is very rhotic and we pronounce our R's because of the Irish influence and whatever else. So they always correct us. I tell you what, when I moved to the UK, I used to say cucumber, and the kids would go, "Miss, do you mean cucumber?" And for a long time, the kids would see me on the road and they would salute me as cucumber. So there we go. Oh yes. And garage, I went garage, and they go, "What,
Yes.
miss?" So yeah, of course, we have to adapt. Now back to the discussion about teaching it explicitly in primary in secondary schools. I spoke to some other friends who are also English teachers, and Hannah said, and she was also a guest. She said, yes, but not whole lessons. Perhaps as a starter, maybe 15 minutes on a skill that's then used in the lesson. For example, apostrophe use or the significance of tenses, grounded in specific text, should make it more memorable. So, not just these standalone lessons saying these are the nouns and these are the different types of nouns. And then the students the next day, they don't have a clue what that is or they can't identify it. Another friend agreed with Hannah and said it needs to be discussed and examples looked at and opportunities for practicing given, but too long spent in it all at once won't make it memorable and students will become bored. She said reading a lot can help rather than just teaching it explicitly. Some of the stuff that came in for Key Stage 3 seemed way too much, and she was referring to the 2014 overall of the national curriculum. She said no one over the age of 35 ever learned at school what a fronted adverbial was. And Charlie, if you were taught a fronted adverbial, it just tells me that you're so young. There needs to be some focus on speaking to, or at least the difference between spoken and written English, as you said before, Angela. There's no getting away from the notion that if you're brought up in a household where speaking standard English is the norm, it's a lot easier to write grammatically. And that's where I'm going to pause and ask you to share your thoughts on that, Angie. Where she said, there's absolutely no doubt if you're exposed to standard English whilst growing up, it makes it easier for you to write it as well. Do you agree?
Well, that was my experience. And so, from a personal point of view, I would say yes. And also from my observations with learners over the years, you could always tell those who came from a very literate household where there was lots of reading and bedtime stories, and where children from particular families were well read because you
Hmm.
heard it in their diction, in their pronunciation, in their vocabulary, and so on. So that I would agree with, but I wouldn't agree with it to the extent that I would exclude the possibility of very good English speakers and English users um, being completely taught, in that they came from a background where that wasn't the case, and they had to
Mhm.
learn it at school, you know, because I have very good friends with students who very good friends who went to boarding schools, and they came from they got a scholarship, so they came from very poor, humble beginnings where a book was unheard of. Because they couldn't
Mhm.
afford it, they would heavily use the library and so on. But they went on to be great writers and great literary people, so I think methodology is where I would like to come in, and especially to pick up on the last comment that you read about how we do the grammar teaching. It's very important. Even though my subject was predominantly history, I did some geography and sociology as well. But whatever the subject I taught, I always infused and embedded grammar in it, because it is the language in which we communicate. So, for example, something that was a constant for me is that if I used a word and I could see from the expressions that they didn't know what it was, it would have been a norm in my classroom for me to just put it at the side, a word box or keyword, and
Mhm.
immediately my learners were so trained that they would hit the dictionaries, find the meaning of it, and they knew that I would expect them to use it as
Mhm.
soon as possible in their writing. And I never lowered my expression, or language, I should say, to suit my students, because I wasn't taught like that. And it helped me. And I thought, well, it gave me aspiration. It made me always trot and gallop after my language teacher. So she would always put words up there for us to just use and use. And so it was almost as a competitive, fun thing to do in the classroom, to find new words and new words. And I made my learners understand that the more words you have, well, the more fluent you can be at any language. So
Yeah.
another thing I would do is pause for a cause in the marking. So my marking took forever always, because if I was just marking right, wrong answer for history, then I'd never really have good essays to read.
Mhm.
I would always stop and correct the grammar, or I would call students in to have a chat with them as to where they're going wrong, what the persistent grammatical errors are, and how to address it. And I'd stop if I had the time and put examples there to say, if you had expressed this way, blah blah, or whatever. So I think if we look at making it contextual, and make it and teach in how should I say, like my mother, she had a way of teaching impromptu, just situational learning.
Yeah.
As we're going along, she would stop, and as it became relevant, she'd say, oh, by the way. And so there are things that I picked up along the way that I've never forgotten, because I learned them in context. They were relevant at the time. So I think teachers need to be sensitive to this, and try and embed language teaching into the learning, so it's not seen as a sore thumb that sticks out, but it's seen as something that's generically a part of
Yeah.
whatever subject they're learning.
Thank you so much. And Angela, I've got somebody online, Koshia, and Koshia said her experience has been contrary, actually. She said she's a grammar buff, but did not have that modeled at home while she was growing up, while her daughter had it modeled, but regularly used incorrect grammar. So she thinks that the explicit learning is also very important and helping students to understand the syntax and get them to work out meaning. Which leads me to my other question, which you've partially answered, uh, Angela. Who is responsible for teaching grammar? And when I asked this question, some of my colleagues actually said, unfortunately, not all teachers are equipped to teach grammar, and sadly, even some English teachers. So let me explain quickly before the English teachers get really mad at me. Now, when I moved to the UK, I discovered that English teacher training was slightly different from what we have in Jamaica, and that is it's more literature heavy. It's about identifying those literary techniques and taking it apart. But when it comes to the linguistic ideas, not everybody is so comfortable with that because they really don't understand the words, the function of these words in sentences. So some of my colleagues have said, unfortunately, some of the teachers themselves are not very competent and maybe in other subjects as well. And so the students are mistaught. Now, one person shared an example. She said when her son was in year five, he got his report and the teacher wrote that he could have uh, extended his ideas, or he could have written in more detail. And she said she was too polite to correct the teacher, but she made sure that her son understood that it was supposed to be have and not of. I actually pointed out there that at that point, she should have used some radical candor. And I've got Sarah online. Sarah, I believe this is Sarah, my vice principal. So Tom 1 and Tom 2, I've got to be on my very best behavior. I do believe there's a senior leader online at this point. She'd be proud that I'm mentioning radical candor. So I was saying to my friend Ruth that that was needed in that context because the teacher was modeling something that was incorrect. So Angela, who is responsible for teaching grammar?
Well, to use the example that you've just given, I think that mother was she was quite correct in what she did, because to break down the confidence of the learner and the teacher, that's another no go zone. That's not helpful, let's say. And but I've always believed, especially wearing my other hat, coming from the curriculum development teacher training hat, because a large part of that job, once the curriculum was developed, we had to go into the academies and train the instructors how to use
Mhm,
the curriculum. So I think that the shareholders for education is always the home, the parents, the household from which the child comes, and it is the community at large, the community brokers, and of course the school. And
mhm,
I think this is a sacred trust that all shareholders have to realize that we are invested in this process, because what the purpose of formal education is about is producing model citizens. We want citizens to come out of the education process who are skilled at communicating and at moving and being in the world that we've created for them, the world of work, in a professional and a helpful way. We just don't want them to be a nuisance to society in what we're saying. So
mhm,
if we want people to express themselves with clarity, if we want good communication in the workplace, if we don't want to have large amounts of work hours being lost because the communication is either non-existent or so poor, then I think everyone has to weigh in on it. Now, obviously, there's going to be strengths and weaknesses, as that example you gave says. But where we are strong, I think we have to just wade into the water, and like that mom did, she had the strength to correct her child. I know of situations where the parents are just clueless, but they're
mhm.
very keen. And so they ask for help. They come into the school, they ask for help, they go to the library, they get books, they educate themselves.
Yeah,
They take on the learning of their child as a part of their responsibility. So I think the short answer is all of the shareholders in society have to realize that we have a part to play.
excellent. Thank you. I totally agree. And often, Angela, I don't know if you'll agree with me, in schools, people tend to think that the literacy coordinator has to be from the English department. However, in recent years, there's a diversion from that. And I see people in history or in other departments, even departments that are not necessarily humanities, taking on that role. And I think it's important for students not just to associate grammar and literacy only with the English department, but recognizing that you need those foundation principles and knowledge in order to excel in other subject areas as well. So I think it's really lovely to see that. Nikki Hill, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you are finding the discussion interesting. And those of you who are online, if you wish, you could download the Podbean app and so you can call in or send us a message. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Um, Angela, this just a question popped up based on our discussion, but do you remember how you were taught grammar in school? Can you share with us a little bit if you recall?
Hmm. Boy, that's going way back. Hmm.
Oh, and it's not that long ago. Stop it.
Oh my goodness. Oh. Well, first of all, even before I respond to that, I just want to say to respond to the comment you made about not necessarily having to come from the linguistics department. Well, I was
Yeah.
a case in point. I was a historian and I was head of the coordinator for English literacy and ESOL. But how I was taught, um, I
Was
think
it explicit? Did you have to
uh
learn the rules by rote?
well, no, no, no. And I think this is why I came out teaching the way I did,
Mhm,
because I appreciated Mrs. Riley's approach. She wasn't my only language teacher, but I had her for fifth form, for upper school and for sixth form. And so I
mhm,
think where it really mattered, she was with us for those years. But even going back to the earlier years, say preschool, I think I was
mhm.
very blessed because my very, very first teacher, she used music, strange
Okay.
enough, song. And so we were learning rules by singing about them, so that aided memory. But then when we got to the point where we were being tested and we had to practice our language, I think what helped was that the staff spoke well, because it was back in the days when we weren't allowed to speak anything but proper English. So hearing it all the time, I think helped. But
Yeah.
I have to say that one of the persons online, I don't want to say her name incorrectly, but she said, she came from a household where the reverse was true between her and her daughter. Well, I
Yeah.
was the anomaly as well, because I came from a well-spoken and a well-read household. But when I got to school and I heard the dialect, which was the Jamaican patois, man,
Yeah.
I just swam in it and I couldn't have enough of it. And I would just speak it all the live long day, but I couldn't do it when I got home. So, but for me, I thought I was better educated because I could converse on two levels, you know. So I think also using speech and drama to reinforce English was something that also helped me in my uptake, because
Okay.
in our drama lessons we learned a lot of Shakespeare, and so when we were back in literature, what we were doing in drama sort of made it make more sense,
Hmm. Hmm.
so the words clicked, the phrases clicked, they were put
Yeah.
in a context, and we realized, oh, it's not so hard. And when we got to things like reading Chaucer and Shakespeare for upper levels and sixth form, we read and we role played. So it put it in a context that made everything make sense to us. So I
Yeah.
think from that point of view, I think it needs to be embedded and it needs to be blended.
And that really ties in well with Mariana's point. She's online all the way from Romania. And she said, it is so true. Grammar teaching is not for everyone, but when it's done with passion and skill, it gives students confidence in all subjects, including MFL. And I know you're an MFL, a very passionate MFL teacher, Mariana. Marianne. So I know exactly where you're coming from. Portia mentioned that etymology is no longer being taught. In my previous school, it was actually embedded in the curriculum, and it helped because sometimes, students are in an exam setting, they do not know the meaning of a particular word, but I always try to encourage them, read around the context, look at the root part, the key parts of the word, the morphology, break it down, the morphemes, and then you'll be able to figure it out. So some of those skills, I don't think they're being taught explicitly, Angela. And I think those of us old school, we need to make sure we leave that legacy behind and ensure that we really teach and equip our students with the communication tools that they so deserve. So, and you mentioned that when you went to school, you have to speak standard English at home. When you went to school, you enjoyed the dialect, the local dialect. Now, here's my question. Is that because our local dialect is so colorful and creative and beautiful, and the English language is a little bit stuffy and uppity.
Well, speaking purely from a Jamaican um perspective,
Hmm.
um that would be true for us Jamaicans, because that for us we would be speaking our heart language. And I want
Hmm.
to say something about the heart language. That's the language that is commonly spoken, and everyone seems to just fall out the womb understanding, you know,
Yes.
as
Hmm.
opposed to an imperial legacy that's being imposed upon you. And so for us in the Caribbean, where our base is about 80% across the board, African descent, and then a plethora of other ethnicities. But
Hmm.
by and large, the British imperial standard, I think it was over three-quarters of the world during its heyday. And so that imperial rule, it was considered to be oppressive. But
Yes,
English is a beautiful language, but it's the
it is.
association with oppression that made people recoil from it, you see. So
Yeah.
maybe in other situations where that oppressiveness and that association with slavery and colonial rule and all of that is removed, then there wouldn't be that barrier, because there can be so many barriers to learning. And so that was a cultural barrier.
Yeah.
So I think it created an unnecessary barrier, because English in itself is a really beautiful language.
It is
However,
indeed.
I've
Hmm.
noticed coming to the UK that the same thing is true regionally, because the English in a British context seem to have trotted off everywhere and badgered everybody else. The old Celtic nations, the Welsh, the Scottish, the Irish, and so forth. And so in those regions, you'll find that they hold on to their first language, and the
Yeah.
Welsh more so than others, where it's recorded and it's written. And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn for Scottish and for Irish. It's more oral tradition. I don't know that they still write. In someone
Yeah.
can correct me if they know better than I do. But so you see again, it's the association of the English coming over as an imperial overlord that makes that knee jerk reaction to English learning and English speaking. And if in the UK, I live just south of Yorkshire in northeast Lincolnshire, and you'll find that that heavy Yorkshire personality, it seeps over into Northeast Lincolnshire, and so
Hmm.
we're considered by them unofficially to be South Yorkshire. And so Yorkshire people are very proud, very resistant to anything that's considered outside, or anyone imposing anything on them. And their dialect is really, really strong. So
Hmm.
I think you can have these barriers put up that are cultural, but by and large, you'll find that your heart language is what you're going to defer to immediately, no matter how many languages you speak. If you take a continental African, for example, the typical African, well, I know mostly people of West African descent, a
Hmm.
few East Africans, and some South Africans. So I can't speak for Africa on the whole. But
Yeah.
in West Africa, I know for sure that the average person will speak 4 or 5 languages just out of the womb. But um if and they pick up they just seem to be gifted with languages, and
Yeah.
they'll pick up English so quickly, and speak it so well. But if I am sure if you pelt them over the head, they are going to scream in their mother language, as
Yes.
I would as a Jamaican, you know.
Oh yeah.
And I have a friend who is a client of mine, and I published a magazine for her. And she works as an ethnodoxologist, and she travels traveled the whole world during her career, translating the Bible. And her
Hmm.
job was to put alongside the translation songs of worship to go along with it. Now
Hmm.
she in her travels and in doing conferences and getting feedback, she was shocked to find out that all the peoples of British colonial, all peoples of the world who share a British colonial past,
Mm-hmm.
had one song to sing, and it was "Could We Sing in Our Heart Language, Please," rather than
Oh,
English.
wow. Mm-hmm.
And so she started doing work into this, and she contacted me and she says, "Well, I'd love to do this magazine that's really focused on that." And it's working with her and preparing the articles for each issue that I realize that, goodness me, there's something to be said for communicating in your first language if you really want to get to the heart of what people
Yes.
feel and what they really think.
Yeah, I really love that, Angela, the heart language. And you said that if you really want to express something, whether joy or anger, and you have another language, whether it's a dialect or a first language, a mother tongue, you tend to lapse into that. And for those of you who've ever studied Search for My Tongue, Imtiaz Daka summed that up really well. When she least expects it, Gujarati comes out. And I also like the point that you made that, people, it's cultural and people may have associated the English language with some form of oppression, hence the resistance. However, it is a beautiful language and it also gives you scope to manipulate it. And Charlie said the word grammar was not mentioned in his entire time in school. And that says a lot. So there's a whole generation who haven't really been exposed to the mechanics of the grammar and to understand. When I say to students, correct this sentence, and they will give me the correct answer. And I said, okay, and why did you change it? They can't explain it. Now, the question is, do they need to explain it? Because sometimes, they learn the language inherently if they're native speakers. So do they need to explain the rules? They just knew the rules, from birth. So it's a whole lot there to unpick. But as we've said before in the show, it just gives us a guide so that we have clarity and consistency. We're going to take a break for the news. And when we come back, we want to look at some of the grammatical mistakes that are commonly made, Angela. So start thinking. And if you're online, if you can type and tell us yours as well, tell us common grammatical mistakes that really get under your skin and you cringe. Welcome, Jamelia. Welcome. Jamelia knows me. I correct them as gently as I possibly can sometimes. But yeah, so we're going to think about that. Some of the grammatical mistakes you hear on the news, you hear in the classroom, in professional settings, and let's talk it out. Stay tuned while we break for the news.
I've always considered myself to be a caring head teacher who acts sensitively to support staff mental health. But what I found increasingly difficult was managing the negative impact on staff mental health when resolving issues related to their employment or daily work. Heartfelt Leadership has been developed by Teachwell Toolkit as a handbook to support head teachers to overcome the challenges of school improvement while supporting staff well-being. We know that difficult conversations can quickly turn into conflict if procedures are not fully transparent, understood and followed. Our handbook takes you through step-by-step processes while maintaining mutual respect, avoiding conflict and finding solutions.
At Bloomsbury Education, we're passionate about supporting teachers with high-quality professional development books from leading experts. Whether you're navigating your first crucial years as an early career teacher or a more experienced teacher looking to refresh your practice or take a step up into leadership, our award-winning books are here to help. We publish practical books to support teaching across primary and secondary, from the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design. Visit the Bloomsbury Education website at bloomsbury.com/education to find out more and use code BLOOMTTR24 to save 20% on all education titles. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
BBC News reports that MI5 has briefed Vice-Chancellors from 24 universities across the UK on the threat from foreign states which could undermine national security. The Vice-Chancellors were warned that cutting-edge research could be targeted by states seeking to boost their own militaries and economies. The Deputy Prime Minister has also announced a consultation on measures to protect UK universities. There has been no direct reference to any one state, but the government has previously warned that China could be gaining influence in British academic research. The institutions involved in the briefing included Oxford, Cambridge, and Imperial College London. The head of the Russell Group said its members take their national security responsibilities incredibly seriously. The chief executive of Universities UK said the body has worked with government for several years. The latest particular threat could be to academic research that has a potential dual use in civilian and military life. The Guardian features the topic of Ofsted one-word judgments as it appears in the news once again. Reaction to the news features prominently in the article, with primary focus given to the views of Professor Julia Waters, sister of Ruth Perry. Ms. Perry's death following an Ofsted inspection prompted a review of a range of aspects of the inspection process, with one-word judgments a main focus of interest. In a statement published on the 25th of April, the government has ruled that the judgments are here to stay. Professor Waters described the government's response to an inquiry by the Commons Education Committee as woefully inadequate. Teaching unions had backed calls for the scrapping of the single-word judgments and of more radical reform to the inspectorate in England. The announcement came as something of a shock, as days earlier the Sunday Times had published a story suggesting the single-word judgment would likely be scrapped. Government have stated that the headline grades provide a succinct and accessible summary for parents, and that they enable government to look at inspection outcomes across England. The statement went on to say they would continue to listen as part of the Big Listen public consultation, although many have criticised the wording of some of the questions, which appear to prevent clear, critical feedback. It seems that funding for education isn't just a hot topic for the UK. The BBC Latin American news site reports on protests in Buenos Aires as thousands of people took to the streets to demand increased funding for public universities. Argentina's president came to office in 2023 and vowed to take a chainsaw to public spending and justified the cuts by calling the state-run universities centres of socialist indoctrination. Ricardo Gelpi, rector of University of Buenos Aires, says the institution may have to close within 3 months without more funding. Pictures from the demonstration show tens of thousands of protesters dancing, playing instruments and holding banners. The BBC also report on a World Health Organization report which shows that a third of 11-year-olds and more than half of 13-year-olds in England have drunk alcohol. Girls were found to be more likely than boys to be drinking and getting drunk aged 15 in England, Wales and Scotland. The World Health Organization called on countries to introduce more measures to protect children. The report looked at data from 4,500 school-aged children from each country in Europe, Central Asia and Canada between 2021 and 22. The focus was on use of cigarettes, vaping, alcohol and cannabis among adolescents. The UK has always had relatively high alcohol use amongst young people, but it has been declining. On cannabis use, the report found more boys in Scotland had used the drug compared to all other countries. No data was provided for England. Smoking is much less common, but the report confirmed that vaping rates have overtaken it in most countries and are above average in the UK. Full details of the report can be found on the BBC website. Finally, Cambridge University's Fitzwilliam College has apologised to students after housekeeping staff allegedly embarrassed one individual by posting images of their messy room. Pictures of the communal areas and a bedroom were emailed around the college as an illustration of what housekeeping staff don't want to see. But the college has since apologised, saying the inclusion of the image of a bedroom was unacceptable and an invasion of privacy. Students had also complained that they were being woken up and asked to tidy communal areas too early, although the college says it has stopped this practice in response to feedback. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
I've always considered myself to be a caring.
Thank you so much, Joe. Oh, lots to take in there. Oh my gosh. That was international education news. We'll need a whole other show to discuss some of those things. What fascinated me mostly was the increase in alcohol usage amongst female students and cannabis amongst the boys. So that's a whole other show. Um, I think there's a message coming to us from Mr. Bean. He said, I'm suggesting you discuss the correct usage of with regards, as regard, or in regards. Oh, wow, that's a good one. A popular one being used in Jamaica, even among government officials, police officers, etc., in referring to an action that took place. The police would have gone to the scene of the crime. I often replied, but they did not go, or what prevented you from going? So, yeah, it took place, yes. So, yeah, so the use of with regards, as regards, in regards. Angela, I don't know if you want to comment on that. Again, it's about the spoken and the written language, isn't it? And as Jamaicans, we're ones to really make up things sometimes, don't we? And it feels like it's the truth and it's the correct way.
Okay, so the correct usage of with regard versus regards and in regard. Oh dear. He couldn't ask for an easier one. Well, in regard to,
Hmm.
with regard for, and I'm not sure as regards if you are describing and referring to an
Yeah,
incident or a situation.
yeah.
Is
I don't. I would probably scrap as regards, to be honest.
Yes, I'm not even sure if I'm looking at it. I'm saying, well, is that a thing?
It's not grammatical. It's not
No.
grammatical.
So yes, with regard to and and what would be better is to say regarding so and so
Yeah, yeah,
if
exactly.
you're describing, yeah,
Yeah,
regarding so and so.
yeah.
Another one that's very, very popular in Jamaica, and I tend to cringe, but it's become such a norm now that I'm wondering if it's just been accepted. Where
Mm-hmm.
people say persons, where you should really
Oh,
say people.
Angie, I was going
It's
to say that.
such a Jamaicanism, and persons so and so, and I'm thinking, yeah, we're talking about people here, just generally people should so and so. You're not specifically referring to an individual
Mhm.
or an individual situation that would require the use of persons, like persons wearing red hats step forward, or but
Mhm.
all the people in the room wearing red hats, would you please come forward?
Yeah.
So that's a very common one.
And it's becoming embedded in practice through the
Yes,
media.
because I hear it at the highest levels.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
this is where now we have to decide, are we going to just change the grammatical rules and let it go and call it a Jamaican and make it Jamaican standard English? Or what do we do? Or do we just use it in Jamaican when we're everywhere else? We just revert to what is, um, considered English, standard English.
Yeah. So, of course, I posed this question to a number of people, and some of my colleagues and friends, they shared some of the things that have crept into the grammar that they find really annoying, especially as English teachers. Should off is one of them. And somebody said using was when were should be used. And at the start of the show, I mentioned that it's becoming very common, or it probably it's always been where people go, you was, when you was.
Well, then,
Instead of were. Yeah.
well,
So
that
that's
brings me
becoming
to my
common.
pet peeve subject verb agreement.
Yeah.
That's if you really want to rattle my cage, that's my
Hmm.
pet one
So,
to correct.
so Angela, is that us being prescriptivists though, or isn't it a creative
Well,
use and a comfortable
well,
use of English language?
well. Let me say that we all of us are going to be guilty of some form of confirmation bias because we tend to have things that we just for one reason or the other, that's just our thing. But
Mhm.
to be fair to the learners, if they have to write and they're writing in a formal setting, then I think we should teach them. When they're just talking to each other, I think we should just leave them alone because they're talking in their own informal groups, and that's the lingua. That's how
Mhm.
they understand each other and they know what they mean. Lord knows sometimes I need a translator, but
Mhm.
but it's that's how the language has evolved in their generation, and they're very clued up as to what the coding is. And I think it's deliberate too, because it's meant to sort of filter the adults out
Yeah,
their communication.
yeah,
So I think if they have to write, especially for exams, that we should teach them what's correct. But when
yeah.
they're having an informal chat, just leave them alone.
Leave them alone. And Mr. Bean said, I was told it's correct to say with regard and not to say with regards. Yeah, we
Yes.
say with
So
regard. You are
yes,
correct. We
you are
you are.
correct.
And Marianne said, what about a small minority? So I mentioned on radio
Oh, that's
regularly during the
tautology.
pandemic.
Yes.
So that is the redundant use
Use
of
of
words. And,
yes.
we hear that all the time. Actually, I've got one here where we misuse it as well. And people say literally when it's not, when it's actually figuratively.
Yes.
So,
And I think they use the word
mhm,
literally just as a way of reinforcing that they really mean what they're saying,
mhm,
and they should
mhm.
just say what they mean.
Yeah, but for some of us kind of on the board of prescriptivists and descriptivists, we don't like it. And Kosha said something like return back, very redundant, or
Oh,
reverse.
yes.
So some
Well,
things that are becoming almost like a part of the grammar now.
well, as I said, my language teacher, she had her pet peeves, and redundancy was one of them. If I had to sum up her philosophy of teaching education, it would be economy of expression. She
Mhm.
just didn't see the point in all this faffing about and all this use of unnecessary words. She said you should just say what you mean and mean what you say. Get to the point. People who
Yeah.
have all day for you to go through your gymnastics, just get to the point. So she would mark really assiduously against redundancy, and so it made I would say all of us as her learners, myself especially, it was a lesson that was not lost on me. Just get to the point and try, and if you can't find the right word, well then choose the best short phrase,
Yeah,
sort of
totally
thing.
agree. So Kosha mentioned the proliferation of this trend with nouns used as a verb. So she finds it rather intriguing. For example, when people say things like the book isn't booking. So it's a little bit more on the
Huh?
colloquial side, but yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, it's not booking today, or so many other things, and it's become people use it in jest amongst themselves, but it's also creeping into like the norm. Again, you relax and you use the language in an informal setting. It's probably fine in that context. Believe it or not, we only have a few more minutes to go. There's another question I'm going to take in a minute. But one of the common things I find is people using me as the subject of the verb instead of I.
Oh
Uh,
yes, and I would
Very
really
common
like
one.
to know what's the decision on that, because it's become so commonplace now that when I correct it, I feel like, am I wrong?
Yeah. You question yourself. For example, you might see, me and my friends went to the park, while grammatically, the correct version would be my friends and
Friends
I,
and I.
because me is the object, I is the subject. But again, the question is, do we go correcting people and policing them? Or let people communicate the way they're comfortable? The only problem is when it comes to academic writing or in a professional setting, that
Well, I was
poses
just
a
waiting for
problem.
you to finish to say that. As you know, if they have to write, they should know. I think a good education gives you options, or gives you lots of tools in your tool bag.
Mhm.
And if we don't frighten them and terrorize them, we should just let them realize that what we're doing is giving them more tools in their bag so that they can be more skillful at communicating. So
So
when you have to write to your boss, or you're writing a letter to so and so, this is how you ought to write it. But if you're having a chat with your friend, then that's informal and that's okay.
Yeah. Kosha said she's going to continue to police the English grammar. So long live the English grammar. Kosha is going to police it. She said informal settings and the way we use language should not impact on the way it ought to be used. Uh, so Errol mentioned something about saying, remember to address would have gone when referring to action which took place. So I'd like a clearer example, if you don't mind. So if you're saying I
Sorry,
would have gone
sorry,
if it wasn't
pardon.
raining. Mhm.
Pardon, I didn't hear what the expression was.
Oh, Errol said, what about would have gone in when referring to action which took place? So if you could just clarify a little bit more for me, Errol. So if you mean I would have gone to the shop if it wasn't raining, so if you could explain, because it has its context. Another one as well, which is really pedantic now and nitpicking, is swapping who for whom and knowing when to use who and when to use who. So that's another thing as well, where who is the subject, whom is the object. In an informal setting, we don't, bother. However, as Kosher is saying, let's police the English language and make sure that we use it correctly all the time. Um,
Yes, because that one will lead to just gross misunderstanding. You have to be very clear
yeah,
between who and whom. Yes.
Yeah. And before we close, Angela, and you give me your final thoughts, one I must mention is when we use few, fewer, and less. That one really annoys me because less should be used when you can't count it, when the noun is not countable, and fewer when you can. So when you can't say less people, but it's becoming very popular as well. So Mr. Bean is saying, for example, the police would have gone when they actually went. Well, yes, that is completely incorrect then in that case. They would have suggested that it didn't happen and it's something that would have been considered. So incorrect. And people, especially in our context, Angela, people listening on who are not really exposed in some environments, they accept that as gospel because it's being said in the media. So
Yes.
yeah, so we
Or
have to be careful.
I had a few that I heard even on the BBC
Hmm.
that made me
Yeah,
choke. I was having dinner. I was like, excuse, what was that?
yeah, yeah. So we're nearing the end of this show. And before we wrap up, I must throw this one in. And everybody who's listening, please stop saying things like "when I was sat" or "when I was stood."
Oh
Okay,
my goodness, I
sit
had
and
that
stand are in
to say.
transitive.
Yes,
Yes,
that's very
they do not
northern.
need the auxiliary. They do not need the auxiliary. The past tense is stood. The past tense is sat. I'm begging you, please, everybody, stop adding the auxiliary to intransitive verbs. Uh, please help me out with that
Well,
one.
I thought that was just a northern thing because I'm in the north. But do you find that in southern England as well?
Oh yeah, it's everywhere. We've
Oh,
only
I
got a couple of minutes
didn't
left,
realize.
Angie. I'm so sorry. We're gonna have to wrap up the show. And it was such a lively and engaging discussion. Thank you so much. And you've got 30 seconds just to sum up your thoughts. Should we make allowance for bending the rules of grammar, or should we be really strict about its transmission? 30 seconds.
Okay, well, in closing, I would say grammar is like our GPS. We need the grammar, punctuation, and spelling. Without it, we're going to be lost. We won't be able to communicate and arrive safely at our communication destination. We'll be all over the place going round and round the villages. So we have to stick to the road code. That's what grammar is. And police it sensitively with discretion, but police it we must because we want to understand each other and we don't want any more confusion than is necessary in the world. And so grammar is what is going to get us to that point. You know, we have
Thank
to
you.
use the rules of grammar, and to use them, we have to learn them. So we have to be
Thank you.
creative in our teaching of it.
Thank you so much. Angela, thank you for sharing with us tonight, listeners across the UK and the rest of the world. I can say tonight, Jamaica, Romania, and Dubai. And Dubai, thank you so much for joining in the discussion. All my people over there in Bristol, thank you so much. I hope the show has clarified whether you are a descriptivist or prescriptivist. Have fun with the English language. Clear communication is the most important thing in the grand scheme of things. So have a lovely evening, everyone. Mr. Bean, thanks again. Sarah, Nikki, Charlie, Marion, Marvin, Mike, thank you all so much. And those of you listening in Jamaica, my parents, thank you for joining. And I will see you in 2 weeks' time on Teachers Talk Radio.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.